Hi everyone, this is our last online reading for our connected learning at home. So I'm going to read through Friday's reading and just talk you through that. If you are confident reading this yourself, please go ahead and do that. You don't need to listen to the video, but if you'd like to go through with me, that's fine as well. So the first thing you're going to do is read the glossary and learn the new words that are here. Then you'll read the next 3 pages and then you'll write your own sentence using some of the vocabulary. So that's this page here. So let's have a look. We've got the glossary here. Ahoy, to call to attention used on ships. Like ahoy there's land. Livestock is another word for farm animals. The marine is a soldier that serves on the ship and on land. Quarters is a place where someone lives. You can see the hammocks there. That's what they called quarters when they were below deck. A ration is a total amount of food given to someone. So each day they counted up how much you could have and they handed it to you. The sergeant, it's a funny spelling, isn't it? We say, not surgeon. A sergeant is a soldier of middle rank. And threadbare, that means thin and tattered with age. We've got some others down here as well that we'll find in our reading. Colony is a group of people living in new country. Colonists are people living in the country. Supplies are like food and water and tools and equipment needed for survival. A commander is the leader of the colony, a bit like a prime minister. Harvest is the food grown to eat. Convicted, that meant you were found guilty. Expedition is a journey or a trip. Embarked means to leave or to travel. And signify means to signal. So you're going to write sentences using some of those words, not all of them, but we'll do that at the end. So we're going to read through this. I'd love for you to read it yourself, but if you'd like me to give you some help, continue to listen to the video. Fascinating facts. Convict women. The typical convict woman was in her 20s. She was single and could read but not write. She was from England or Ireland and had been convicted of robbery. Crimes were quite minor, such as shoplifting and pickpocketing. Considering the sentence was 7 years of punishment, for many women it was their first crime. The ship, Lady Penrhyn, carried the most female convicts, 101, and she was also the slowest ship. The convicts had already spent years in British prisons before the voyage. Many women were ill with disease, and their clothes had turned to rags. No one had washed them for months. 5 women died before they even left England, and many others died on the journey or soon after arriving in Australia. Such hard conditions. Now, the Prince of Wales ship. The Prince of Wales is one of the newest ships in the First Fleet. Just a few years old when she sailed from England at 3 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of May, 1787. But she was the second smallest of the convict transport ships. The Prince of Wales sailed with 47 female convicts, 1 male convict, and 31 Marines on board. James Parfitt, son of the Marine John Parfitt, and his wife Sarah, was born during the voyage. On the 23rd of November, 1787, a sailor, Jorgen Jorgensen, fell overboard from high up in the ship's rigging, that's the ropes. The ship was moving so quickly that it was impossible to stop and save him. Wow, so he got left overboard. Such a different life 200 years ago. Finding food. 3 months after the first fleet arrived, the officers in charge of the colony counted what was left of the animals they had brought from England. 7 horses, 7 cattle, 29 sheep, 74 pigs, 5 rabbits, 18 turkeys, 29 geese, 35 ducks, and 209 fowls. They would be like chickens. The colonists were desperate for a reliable, which means something they could rely on, supply of food. The seed they had brought from England did not grow. It had dried out or been attacked by insects. Other seeds failed to grow in the sandy soils around Sydney Cove. Governor Phillip, or Captain Arthur Phillip, organised expeditions up the Parramatta River west from Sydney Cove. The colonists found better land for farming. Phillip set up a second settlement at what is now Parramatta on the 2nd November 1788, and convicts were sent to clear the land and plant crops. And it's this area today, if they hadn't have been able to grow things, they wouldn't have survived and had any food. Now we're going to read a bit more about the European settlement of Australia. So this should be a bit of revision for you. On January the 18th, 1788, the first fleet arrived at Botany Bay in New South Wales. That's where the airport is today. That's where Captain Cook had stopped. The governor in charge of the fleet, Captain Arthur Phillip, decided that Botany Bay was not suitable for settlement. It was open to the sea and the soil was poor for growing crops. Almost a week later, in Sydney Harbour, Captain Arthur Phillip raised the British flag to signify the start of a new colony. The penal, think about the convict, settlement consisted of approximately 700 convicts and 200 sailors. There were a few women and children on board the ship too. The convicts were instructed to build temporary, which means not permanent, so like tents, buildings for settlers of the colony. From the very beginning, there were problems in the new colony. The convicts and colonisers thought the land would be lush and fertile, but instead it was dry, barren, and infertile. They just couldn't grow their fruits and vegetables like they could in England. Shelter was also a problem. The colony had few building materials and many of the tools on board the ships were quickly damaged. So things would get blunt and break and they didn't have replacements. Remember it's summer too, so it would have been very hot. Extra clothing had not been loaded on the first fleet before it embarked or left from Portsmouth. The convicts and the sailors from England and Ireland dressed in dirty and threadbare clothing until the second fleet arrived. In November 1788, Captain Arthur Phillip started another settlement at Rose Hill near Parramatta. With strict and careful management, the colony there survived and grew. Further west. Okay, I hope you enjoyed reading a little bit more about that first fleet. Over here we have a bit of a timeline so you can see how they survived that first year. So on the 20th of January they arrived in Botany Bay. On the 24th, the two ships commanded by the French explorer La Pérouse arrived in Botany Bay. On the 26th, Governor Phillip raised the British flag. It was important he did that because the French actually wanted to come in and take Australia as theirs, or New Holland, but the British had to show that they were now going to be owners. In May, the new colony runs short of food. They hadn't been there very long, they weren't able to grow things. They were thinking it'd be cooler like England with nice, rich, really black sort of soil, but instead it was sandy and dry and harsh. May also, the first stone of Government House is laid. In June, the last of the cattle that arrived on the first fleet wanders away from the colony. Some of the animals were found 7 years later, so they didn't have fences built properly. In July, Governor Phillip estimates there are about 1,500 Aboriginal people living in the area around Sydney Cove. So even though they claimed it as theirs, they didn't believe Aboriginal people were living there, but they actually were. And they started to realise how many. In July, the first harvest from a small farm at the current site of Sydney Royal Botanic Gardens fails. That's right near where not far from where the Opera House is today. And this was due to rats, poor soil, and being planted in the wrong season. In October, the ship Sirius sails to Cape Town in Africa to gather supplies for the colony. In December, Charles Wilson, a convict, is the first man to die of starvation, so they just couldn't cope. They had such little amount of food. Then in December, Governor Phillip captures Arabanu, a Gadigal man, an Aboriginal man, to learn about the Gadigal people. So they tried to learn about the people living there, It was very strange they'd capture them, but they didn't have the same respect. And then he did learn the language, and Governor Arthur Phillip was known to be very good and kind to the Aboriginal people, but a lot of European settlers were afraid of them and didn't respect them. So that's a little bit about that time in 1788, the very first time English people came into the country. Before that, there was nobody settling here, and the Aboriginal people were living very peacefully. Something to think about. Now we're going to go back up here, and you can write a sentence for some of these words. So livestock, write your own sentence. So you could say, our farm has lots of livestock. Remember, capital letter and full stop, Marine. The Marine ordered the convicts' quarters. The prisoners were kept in quarters and slept in hammocks. Remember, we need capital letter and a full stop. Ration. The convicts were not given many rations, or we could say the children had half the ration of adults. The sergeant was cruel and would beat convicts. Threadbare, we could say something like the convict women had threadbare clothes. Colony. The colony was set up at Sydney Cove. Commander. The commander was in charge of the ship. Harvest. The First Fleet could not grow a successful or a good harvest. Convicted. Even young children were convicted of crimes and sent to Australia. Expedition. We could say something like they made an expedition to Parramatta, up the Parramatta River, to grow more food. So you could write your own sentences, but hopefully that helps you. Thank you for doing wonderful reading today, and I hope you're able to write your sentences easily. Please message me or Mr. Northwood if you'd like some help. And I hope you learnt some new vocabulary and words today too. All right, goodbye.